Welcome to Slow Night Ancient Tales, where the moonlight gently rests upon your window. Tonight's story is an old Korean classic, 10 Lives and 9 Deaths. True to its name, it is a grand yet heartwarming tale of people who defy their predestined fate and create miracles through profound sincerity and a kind heart. You have worked truly hard today. Now leave the heavy burdens of your mind outside the door and let yourself sink deep into your soft blankets. As you quietly surrender to the slow currents of this ancient tale, you will soon drift into a deep, peaceful sleep. Now, let the story of a long night that changes destiny begin. A tale of loyalty and righteousness, 10 lives and 9 deaths. It was around the middle of the 9th lunar month in autumn. The moonlight filled the courtyard, and the autumn wind blew with a lonely rustle. The mountains and streams, the grass and the trees had all let go of spring, and before long the leaves were turning red and falling. Pondering upon this life of mine, it feels like a mere grain of millet in the vast blue sea, a fleeting 100 years that pass in the blink of an eye. The heartless years flow by like water. In this ephemeral world, wealth and poverty, nobility and lowliness, life and death, success and failure, all have their appointed times for every person. Some people are blessed with good fortune. They have sons and daughters, marry them off, and enjoy boundless happiness until the end of their days. Then, leaving behind all worldly matters, they follow the Queen Mother of the West to the immortal peach banquet, residing in grand and magnificent mansions, befriending the 4 gray-haired elders of Mount Shang, setting out delicacies from the mountains and seas, pouring fine wine, and enjoying themselves to the fullest while living for 10,000 years. Yet my fate is so thin and unfortunate. To not have a single child, neither a son nor a daughter, is truly a miserable thing. Through the long, endless autumn nights, I toss and turn, unable to sleep, passing the time with long and short sighs. One day I lamented together with my wife, saying, "Since the two of us became husband and wife, we have belonged to a prestigious family for generations. My official rank has reached that of a minister, and our wealth is abundant. We have nothing to envy in this world. However, having not a single drop of our own blood to carry on the family line, we will cut off the ancestral offerings. How miserable and devastating this is. The ancient texts say that among the 3,000 sins of unfilial conduct, having no heir is the greatest. When we die and go to the underworld later on, with what face shall we look upon our ancestors?" At this, his wife sighed sorrowfully and said, "That we have no children is entirely due to my grave sins. Yet, through your great virtue, you did not abandon me, but allowed me to stay in your noble family. That grace is something my white bones will never forget. Please, take a virtuous lady from a good family as a second wife, so that she may be blessed with a precious child." The minister replied, "My destiny is fraught with hardship, which is why I have no children. How could I resent you, my wife?" With that, he brought out food and wine, and they consoled each other, offering each other drinks. As the day grew dark, they each returned to their bedchambers. That night, the wife had a dream. The gates of heaven opened, and a celestial being descended riding on a cloud. Pointing to a young boy, he said, "This child is originally the son of the Dragon King of the East Sea. He committed a sin against the heavenly emperor and was cast out into the human realm. He had nowhere to rely on, but the spirit of the southern mountain directed me to bring him here. Please raise him preciously and pass on your family line." Saying this, he drifted away. Although it was a dream, the wife felt deeply awed and bowed countless times toward the celestial being. When she awoke, she realized it was but a dream in her bed. She immediately invited the minister and told him the story of the dream. The minister answered, "The blue heavens have looked down upon our childless state with pity and have granted us a precious son." Indeed, from that very month she conceived, and after 10 months she gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. 5 colored clouds surrounded the house, making it difficult to see even a few steps ahead, and a fragrant scent filled the air. When they looked at the infant, although wrapped in swaddling clothes, his frame was large and his voice was clear and resonant, astonishing everyone. The minister was overjoyed. He named the child Unseon and gave him the courtesy name Maeng, meaning interpreting the dream. Unseon gradually grew, and when he reached the age of 5, his intelligence was extraordinary, and he was quick and agile in everything he did. The minister and his wife loved him dearly, worrying only that his life might be too short. One day, an old monk happened to pass by the front gate, chanting Buddhist prayers and asking for alms. Hearing this, the wife called her maidservant Chuol and said, "There is a monk begging outside the gate. Give him a generous amount of clean grain." Chuol listened to the order and went out with a peck of white rice. Unseon followed Chuol out to watch. The monk stared at Unseon for a long time. Then, receiving the white rice, he expressed his gratitude, turned around and said, "I do not know whose noble son this boy is, but 10 years from now, he will face 3 or 4 sudden misfortunes and will not escape death." After saying this, he walked away. Hearing these words, Chuol ran back, stumbling and falling in her haste to report this to the wife. The wife called the minister and relayed the words. The minister was greatly shocked, his face turning pale. He called a servant and said, "The monk who was just begging for alms could not have gone far. Go quickly and find him." The servant heard the command, went out to look, but the monk was already nowhere to be seen. Feeling anxious, he searched in all directions and finally found the monk begging in a secluded place. He called out to the old monk, "My lord, the minister has ordered me to bring you, Reverend Master. Please come with me." The old monk replied, "Even if this humble monk goes, what can be done about the lifespan decreed by heaven?" He followed reluctantly. At this time, the minister and his wife, having gained Unseon late in life, loved him like a jewel in their palms. Hearing the maidservant's words, they were filled with dread and awaited the old monk. Soon, the servant announced the old monk's arrival. The minister came out to the outer hall to welcome him. After exchanging proper greetings and taking their seats, the minister looked at the monk's appearance. He had a ruddy complexion and white hair, and his demeanor was holy and majestic. Knowing he was no ordinary monk, the minister offered him tea and refreshments, treating him with great hospitality. Then he asked, "Where do you reside, Reverend Master, and for what reason have you come to this humble place?" The old monk rose again, brought his hands together in a bow, and said, "This humble monk is the almoner of Cheongryongsa Temple on Mount Yongbo in Gyeongju. The temple is old and crumbling, so I am hoping to collect alms with a book of good deeds." The minister leaned in closer and asked respectfully, "We will offer alms according to our means. However, I am told you said something when you visited our humble home earlier. Please tell me of the good and bad fortune." The old monk answered, "When I was begging at the front gate of your noble house, a certain young master came out and stood there. I briefly looked at his face, and it seemed that in 10 years' time he will face a destiny of 10 lives and 9 deaths. That is why I carelessly spoke those words, and it seems you, my lord, have heard them." The minister said, "That child is my only son gained late in life. I humbly beg you, Reverend Master, to judge his fate of life and death, and teach us a way to avoid this misfortune so he may escape death. If you do, I will repay this debt of gratitude even after my bones have turned to dust." The old monk said, "After passing the destiny of death, he will achieve wealth and fame, and his reputation will shake the whole nation. However, there is no way to avoid this misfortune, so my heart is heavy." Hearing this, the wife, who had come near the outer hall, turned pale with shock and despair. She went into the inner chamber, held Unseon, and wailed loudly, causing all the servants to weep in sorrow. At this time, the minister earnestly begged, "Reverend Master, please bestow your compassionate heart and save my child." The old monk remained silent for a long while. After thinking again, he said to the minister, "If you call all the slaves of your household to stand before me, there might be a way." The minister immediately called all his servants. Among them was a boy who was blind in one eye, unable to use one arm, and limped on one leg, a disabled boy. The boy's surname was Gol, his name was Gaedong, and he was 15 years old. Although half his body was paralyzed, he was full of loyalty and filial piety. His devotion to his master was profound, and he was deeply filial to his own parents. The old monk looked at him closely for a long time, then said to the minister, "Send the young master and that boy away together on a certain year, month, and day. Do not give them a single penny of wealth. Only give the young master his everyday clothes." Let them hide their traces for 10 years, begging in all directions and weathering the wind and frost. If his life is in that boy's hands, it will be easier for him to survive, and he may avoid the misfortune. Please, I beg you not to take my words lightly." He requested this once more, then said his farewells. As soon as he stepped down from the stone stairs, his footsteps vanished without a trace. Only then did the minister realize he was a divine monk. He bowed countless times toward the empty sky. He went into his wife's quarters, delivered the old monk's words, and wept loudly. Unseon held back his tears and said, "Life, death, hardship, and joy are all my destiny, and human life is determined by heaven. How could I surely die? I humbly beg you, Father, do not worry." Thus the minister and his wife, with no other choice, decided to send him away as the old monk had instructed. It was the 3rd lunar month of spring in the year of Gabja. As the day to part with Unseon drew near, the wife made a set of clothes for him. How could anyone describe the hearts of those parents as they prepared to send him away? As the departure day approached, they called Gaidong and said, "You are originally a loyal servant of our house. Even if you wander in all directions across the 4 seas serving the young master, please do not be negligent. Travel carefully, and when 10 years have passed, return immediately so that father, son, master, and servant may reunite." Finishing these words, they embraced Unseon and wailed loudly. Everyone watching, including the servants, could not help but shed tears at the heartbreaking sight. Unseon and Gaidong, seeing the minister and his wife crying, also shed tears like rain. Bidding farewell, they said, "Today we leave your presence and will not be able to see you for 10 years. We humbly beg you, mother and father, to think of your unfilial son as a dead child amidst the autumn moons and spring breezes. Please preserve your bodies, precious as 1,000 pieces of gold, so that you may see this unfilial son's face again in 10 years. Bowing repeatedly and weeping bitterly, they said their goodbyes. With Gaidong leading the way, they set off on their journey. How could the sorrowful demeanor of the minister and his wife be fully recorded? Unseon looked back with every step, stumbling and falling with every other step. The path they walked grew further and further away, and as they crossed a mountain, the voices of the minister and his wife faded into silence. The master and servant held each other and wept. It seemed as if the sun and moon lost their light, and the grass and trees all mourned with them. Pulling themselves together, they looked at their surroundings and saw that the day was drawing to a close. With no other choice, the master and servant held hands and walked aimlessly toward the villages, begging for food. Meanwhile, the minister and his wife, having parted with Unseon, lived a life worse than death, spending their days in tears. As for Gaidong, he escorted the young master until they reached a certain place. Their stomachs were hungry, and their feet were covered in blisters. Not knowing where to go, they sat by the roadside and cried. Barely gathering his senses, Gaidong thought of a plan. He went around the village, and whenever he found a relatively large house, he sought out the owner, bowed respectfully, and said, "This humble servant was a slave of the minister Lee family in the land of Gumnung. But our family's fortune turned tragic. The minister and his wife suddenly fell ill and passed away at the same time. After burying them in the ancestral mountain, the family's wealth was completely ruined. Now I carry the 5-year-old young master on my back, wandering and begging for food. Our travel funds are completely exhausted. I humbly beg you, kind host, take pity on this miserable life and help us just for a moment." Hearing these words, everyone felt pity. Some gave money, and some gave provisions. In this way, they managed to avoid starvation and thirst. But day and night, their longing for their parents was so desperate that they sat by the roadside, spending their time in tears. Their appearances became haggard, and their clothes were in rags. Wherever they went, their wretched state was beyond measure. As the days passed, the thought of their parents grew ever more intense, but their 9 curved hearts were as pure as spring snow. Before they knew it, time flowed like water, and the young master was now 8 years old, and Gaidong was 19. They arrived at a village. It was around the full moon of the 3rd lunar month in the year of Jeongmyo. Everywhere, the songs of sorrowful birds boasted of the spring mood, and exotic flowers and rare grasses were in full bloom on every peak. But the cuckoo and the nightingale cried mournfully, making the sorrow of the wanderers even more profound. The master and servant, harboring deep worries, admired the colors of spring and gradually walked deeper into the mountain valley. Layered rocks and steep cliffs surrounded them like a folding screen on the left and right, and the sound of clear waterfalls harmonized with the musical notes of nature. The scenery was absolutely breathtaking. The master and servant thought of their hometown and lamented their fate, tears falling like rain. Then Unseon said to Gaedong, "We have wandered miserably from east to west, only filled with sorrow, unable to show the spirit of a true man. Now that we have luckily come to a quiet mountain with no trace of people, I will play around for a moment." He threw his body and leaped over a tree dozens of feet tall, and effortlessly lifted a massive boulder and threw it. Only then did Gaedong see the young master's bravery, and stood in awe. As they lingered, the sun set over the western mountains. Not knowing what to do, they hesitated. Suddenly, they heard the sound of a temple bell. Knowing there was a temple nearby, they walked further in and saw red railings and a magnificent pavilion nestled in the deep green mountains. Delighted, they went in and looked around. On a signboard above the gate, large golden letters read, "Cheongryongsa Temple of Mount Yeongbo in Gyeongju." They entered the main hall, bowed before the Buddha, and came out. All the monks saw the young master's demeanor and asked, "We do not know whose noble son you are, but for what reason have you come to this place?" Unseon replied, "My fate was harsh. I lost my parents early, and our family's wealth was destroyed. With nowhere to turn, I wandered and begged across the 4 seas until I arrived here." Hearing this, all the monks felt pity and treated them generously with morning and evening meals. The next day, as they were looking around the temple, they reached a detached pavilion where 6 or 7 scholars were gathered, studying. Gaedong said to the young master, "Young master, you are already 8 or 9 years old. I think it would be good for you to learn to read and write." Unseon said, "Your words are admirable and welcome, but how can we afford books and food? And who would teach reading and writing to someone without a home?" Gaedong answered, "If you truly wish to study diligently, please do not worry about that." He then looked at the scholars, prostrated himself, bowed twice, and said, "This humble one was a slave of the minister Lee family. Our family's fortune turned tragic. A few years ago, the minister and his wife suddenly fell ill and passed away at the same time. After burying them in the ancestral mountain, the family's wealth was ruined, and we had nowhere to rely on. All the servants ran away, and the household fell into ruin. I have been serving the 5-year-old young master, wandering and begging from east to west for 4 or 5 years already. By the grace of heaven, we have arrived here. I humbly beg all you noble scholars to bestow your grace, teach our young master to read, and help him escape ignorance." He pleaded earnestly, saying, "I will put my entire heart and strength into providing everything needed for his studies." Hearing this plea, the scholars seated there found it both admirable and pitiful. They agreed to his request and invited Unseon in. Although the young child was wrapped in ragged clothes and looked shabby, he had the air of an immortal, and his voice was lively and confident. The scholars cherished him and taught him with utmost sincerity. As months passed, Unseon's innate talents shone. His intelligence was extraordinary. Hearing one thing, he understood 10. There was no classic text or history book he did not master, and the scholars could not stop praising him. Hearing this, Gaedong was overjoyed. Every day he went around the villages begging. When he received grain, he used it for their food. When he received money, he gathered it, gave it to the monks, and asked them to lend it out for interest. Time flowed like water, and 7 years of study passed. Unseon was now 15 years old. With a figure like an immortal and a handsome face, his writing and calligraphy surpassed even the greatest masters. He was a remarkable man of the age, who would not praise him. As the year drew to a close, the scholars returned to their respective homes. But Unseon and his servant spent the new year in a foreign land for many years. How could one force into words that sorrowful situation? Eventually, it was the full moon of the first lunar month. The scholars returned, exchanged New Year's greetings, gathered their books, and prepared to leave. When Unseon asked the reason, the scholars replied, There will be a special royal examination on the 15th of April this year, so we are going to observe it. Unseon said farewell to his fellow students. Sitting alone day and night, he thought of his parents and let out a long sigh, tears soaking his collar. Gaedong asked, "Young master, you are not reading, and your face is full of sorrow. I cannot fathom the reason." The young master answered, "Those I studied with are all going to the state examination, but my fate is harsh. 10 years have passed since I left home, and I do not even know if my parents are alive or dead. I am a lonely soul in a strange land 1,000 miles away. How could I not be sorrowful?" Gaedong said, "If you wish to go to the examination, I have prepared something. Let us go." He collected all the money he had left with the monks, but it was only 15 yang. He took it, went out to a village, bought a horse, returned, and asked the young master to leave. The young master asked, "Where did you get that horse?" Gaedong replied, "They say the capital is thousands of miles from here. How could you walk there? I thought it would be better if you rode a horse, so I bought it with the pennies I saved one by one." All the scholars found this even more admirable. They praised him profusely, each giving money to help with travel expenses, and asked to meet again in the future. The next day, they bid farewell to the scholars, left the village entrance, and headed toward the capital. It was the second lunar month in the year of Gyeyu. Although Gaedong was disabled, holding the horse's reins and setting out, his heart was so lively he felt like he could fly. When the sun set, he found a host and secured lodging. When he met travelers on the road, he explained how he was serving the young master on his way to the examination. Everyone who heard the story took pity on them and simultaneously admired Gaedong's loyalty. Some bought them food, and some gave them money for their journey. Though they had no money of their own, they could easily avoid hunger and thirst. After many days, they reached the capital. The day of the examination was not far off. They tried to find lodging, but scholars from all over the world had gathered like clouds, filling every inn completely. They had nowhere to stay and were at a loss. Just then, as they crossed the Namgyo Bridge beneath the southern mountain, an old woman came out of a small thatched cottage holding a broom. As she swept the yard, she gazed quietly at the scenery. Gaedong went up to the old woman, bowed deeply, and said, "This humble servant was originally a slave of the minister Lee family in the land of Gomnong in Jerimbu. Suddenly, misfortune struck, and the minister and his wife passed away at the same time. The family's wealth was ruined, and I took the 5-year-old young boy, wandering and begging in all directions. By the grace of several scholars at Cheongryongsa Temple on Mount Yeongbo, he was able to study. Now we have traveled 1,000 miles for this state examination. But we have not been able to find an inn until this moment, and have been wandering until we finally saw your noble home. It seems you have not taken in any scholars. Please, noble lady, allow this pitiful scholar to stay for just a short while." Hearing these words, the old woman felt sympathy and pity. "My house has no outer quarters, and it is just my old self living here alone, so what is there to fear? But the house is shabby, and I am afraid it is too unclean to host the young master." Gaedong expressed his gratitude, saying, "To take in people with nowhere to rely on like this, your grace is unforgettable." He then escorted the young master inside. At this time there lived a blind man near Namgyo. His surname was Maeng, and people called him Master Maeng. He was known for judging good and bad fortune, and his predictions were said to be equal to those of Shaoyong from the old days. His fortune-telling fee was 15 yang, but people seeking his readings gathered like clouds, and many could not even get a chance to see him. The old woman, seeing the pitiful state of Gaedong and his master, could not help but feel compassion and said to Gaedong, "Master Meng's fortune-telling here is said to be like that of a ghost, and everyone praises him. How about going there for the sake of the young master?" Hearing this, Gaedong thanked the old woman and said, "My desire to have his fortune told is immense, but we have no money for the fee, so what can be done?" He sighed endlessly until he thought of a plan. He took the horse the young master had ridden, went to the market, and managed to sell it for barely 10 yang. However, he was still short by 5 yang and could not afford the fortune-telling. The master and servant lamented together. Seeing this, the old woman asked the reason, and Gaedong replied, I wish to get a fortune reading from Master Maeng for the young master, but I am short by 5 nyang and cannot get the reading. How could this not be heartbreaking? Hearing this, the old woman said, I have 5 nyang that I saved penny by penny. Take this and go get the fortune reading. She handed him the money. Gaedong stood up again, expressed his gratitude, and went to find Master Maeng to get the reading. At this time, the blind man had been entirely absorbed in fortune-telling day and night. Exhausted, he was dozing off for a moment. In a state between waking and sleeping, an old monk came to him and said, A pitiful boy is coming right now to get his fortune told. Wake up, clear your mind, and make sure he escapes death. Teach him the way to live, no matter what. Startled, he woke up, realizing it was a dream. He struck his head, pondering the meaning of the dream, when suddenly a boy came looking for him outside the door. He told the boy to come in and asked the reason for his visit. Gaedong offered the fee and said, I hope you can judge the good and bad fortune of our young master. Master Maeng sat quietly for a long while, thinking. Then he raised the fortune-telling sticks high, shook them, and prayed. On this day, the 8th of the 3rd lunar month in the year of Gyeyu, Yi Unseon, born in the year of Gyesa, residing in Gumnong, Gerimbu, humbly asks for a reading. Having parted with his parents at the age of 5 and living together with his servant Gaedong, he has now come to observe the state examination. He cannot know whether he will pass or fail, whether he will meet his parents again or not, and whether his life will be long or short. I humbly beg the Honorable Master to reveal all things without hiding anything. He drew a fortune stick. After pondering for a long time, he looked up at the sky, let out a hollow laugh, furrowed his brows, rolled his blind eyes, and sighed. I am 40 years old, and I have been telling fortunes all this time, but this is the first time in my life I have seen such a reading. Gaedong asked, What is the reading that makes you laugh so hollowly at the sky, Master? The Master replied, What is the use of hearing this reading, and refused to speak. Hearing this, Gaedong's mind became frantic. Weeping bitterly, he pleaded, Please judge the good and bad fortune and tell us of his life and death. Master Maeng replied, The young master's destiny cannot pass the hours of Seoul and Hae, 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. on the 14th. Hearing these words, Gaedong felt as if his soul was flying away. He pleaded again, If you know he will die, how could you not know a way for him to live? I humbly beg you, Master, bestow your life-saving virtue and save our young master. If you do, I will carve your grace into my bones and repay you. His crying sounded as if it could melt a heart of iron and stone. Master Maeng said to Gaedong, Because your sincerity is so deep, I will think about it again. He drew another reading and sat there. Suddenly he spoke to Gaedong. In this city there is a man named Chancellor Kim. His personal name is Yongsu. He passed the state examination at a young age, and his wealth and fame are unmatched in the world. He has no sons, only one daughter. That girl's name is Okhyang. She is 16 years old, with a face like a flower and a form like the moon, the most beautiful in the nation. Her talents are extraordinary, and there is no classic text or history book she has not mastered. She knows the good and bad fortunes of people and can easily command spirits. Because of this, her parents love her dearly. They built a separate pavilion in the back garden where she resides. Truly, it is said her appearance is like a nightingale by the waters of Mansu, or a white heron in the misty rain of a river. That young lady had a connection with your young master in a past life. Therefore, if he meets that young lady on the 14th, he may seek a way to save his life. If he fails to do so, there is absolutely no other way. Gaedong asked again, If that happens, will the young master preserve his life, and will he ever see his parents again? Master Maeng purified himself once more, burned incense, bowed, and poured his utmost sincerity into the divination. He said, The reading shows misfortune first, but good fortune later. He will pass the examination with the highest honors on the 15th, immediately become a Hanlum scholar of the 6th rank, take a wife, and return to his hometown as the governor of Gerimbu. He will find and see his parents again, and he is destined to enjoy wealth, honor, and many sons. Hearing this, Gaedong was filled with both joy and sorrow. He bowed, said his goodbyes, and returned. He told the old woman every detail of the divination Master Maeng had performed, weeping as he spoke. Meanwhile, Chancellor Kim and his wife cherished their daughter Okhyang like a jewel in the palm of their hands. They wished to find a splendid husband for her to enjoy the pleasures of family life. At this time, there was a high official in the northern village of Namyang. His surname was Baek, and his name was Sonmin. He came from a family of great prestige for generations, and his rank had reached the Minister of Personnel. His reputation covered the court and the country, but he did not have a single child, which he lamented day and night. One day, he went up to a pavilion with his wife, Lady Okhyang, to enjoy the scenery. He ordered the maids to bring out wine, and the couple offered drinks to each other, lamenting their childlessness. Suddenly, Lady Okhyang felt tired and leaned against the railing, dozing off for a moment. In her dream, a celestial being rode past on a crane and handed her a white feather fan. She took it and saw that it was inscribed with red letters, "Sansan is the young man, Mokwang is the human life." She pondered the meaning of this. Suddenly a fierce wind arose, snatching the fan and throwing it below the pavilion. Out of nowhere, 3 or 4 men with wild, unkempt hair rushed in, grabbed the fan, ran away, and fought over it. Feeling a sense of loss, she tried to find them, but the sound of the men fighting woke her up. It was a fleeting dream. She told the minister about the dream. The minister had experienced the exact same dream. Considering it miraculous, he said, "Heaven has taken pity on our childlessness and granted us a precious son." He wrote down the words from the fan, though they never fully understood their meaning. From that month on, she showed signs of pregnancy, and after 10 months, 5 colored clouds surrounded the roof of their house. Soon, she gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. His frame was large, and his voice was clear and resonant. They named him Unseon. Unseon gradually grew, and at the age of 16, his brilliant writing and calligraphy were considered the best of his generation. Who among the neighbors, relatives, and servants would not praise him? When Chancellor Kim heard this rumor, he wished to make him his son-in-law. He planned to have Unseon pass the state examination and then arrange the marriage. So he set a topic for a poem, wrote his own piece, sent it on premium poetry paper, and firmly established a secret agreement. Meanwhile, the old woman had a daughter named Hwaseon. Her intelligence and talents were extraordinary, and she worked as a servant in Chancellor Kim's household, assigned to the young lady's bedchamber. One day, she came out to see her mother and saw the young master and Gaedong crying. Hwaseon wanted to ask the reason, but because they were strangers, she could not ask and just stood by the closed door. The old woman called Hwaseon and said, "There should be a distinction between men and women, but do not mind that and come in." Hwaseon reluctantly went in, sat beside her old mother, and asked, "For what reason are you weeping so sorrowfully, mother?" The old woman answered, "This young master is from the countryside and came for the examination. When he got a reading from Master Maeng, the master said he is destined to die between 7 p.m. and 11 p.m. on the 14th. But if he safely passes that time, he will pass the examination with the highest honors and immediately become a Hanlim scholar. Still, they say he will die, so isn't it pitiful?" The old woman wept bitterly. Hwaseon asked, "Did they say there is absolutely no way to save him?" The old mother replied, "They said he must enter the room of the young lady you serve to have a chance at living. Dying is easy, but how could he possibly enter that room?" Hwaseon sat quietly for a moment, then turned to Unseon and said, "I am the daughter of this house's owner, serving as a slave in Chancellor Kim's household. It is presumptuous of me to speak to you upon seeing you today, young master, but may I ask your honorable name and what brings you to this humble place?" With a long sigh, Unseon said, "I am the late-born son of Minister Lee of Gumnung in Gyerimbu. My surname is Lee, my name is Unseon, and I am 15 years old. 10 years ago, a monk looked at my face and said that when I turned 15, I would die a sudden death. He said that if I parted from my parents for 10 years, I would avoid this misfortune. So, I took my servant Gaedong and suffered through 10 years of wind and frost. I came here for the current state examination, and hearing that Master Maeng's divination is the most brilliant, I got a reading. He said I must enter your young lady's room to escape this sudden death. I intend to endure any hardship to enter her room. I humbly beg you, young lady, take pity on my life and death and think deeply on this." The young woman thought to herself, "A young master from thousands of miles away has come seeking me. This must be a match made by heaven. I will save him and send him on his way." But she remained silent. Seeing her demeanor, Unseon sat closer, took her hand, and said, "Young lady, please bend your ice and snow-like chastity for just a moment to save this fleeting life of mine." He put out the candles, and they went to the bed, sharing the joys of intimacy. How could words describe the affection between the two? The young lady lit the candles again and brought out delicious wine and side dishes, offering them to him. The night grew deep, and it was already midnight. A voice echoed in the air, shouting, "There is someone to be taken from the young lady's room. Send him out quickly." Knowing they were ghosts serving as the underworld's messengers, the young lady loudly scolded them and recited a scripture to drive away evil spirits. The ghosts could not intrude and fled. The young master suddenly fainted. Greatly alarmed, the young lady rubbed his limbs and ground a life-restoring pill, putting it in his mouth. Soon he regained his senses. She offered him wine and food, and they talked until the sound of a rooster crowing could be heard in the distance. The young lady said, "There is no end to the things we could say, but how could we not feel sorrowful at parting?" Unseon replied, "My wandering body has been saved by your life-giving virtue, and my life is spared. This grace is unforgettable even to my white bones. I wish to spend 100 years together as husband and wife to repay even half of this grace. Please teach me a clever plan." The young lady said, "I am confined to the deep inner chambers and know little of the world, but my father, out of love for me, has been seeking a talented man. Hearing of the extraordinary talents of the son of Minister Baek from the northern village of Namyang, he decided to make him his son-in-law. He plans to have him pass the examination with the highest honors and then marry him. He has already sent the poetry topic and the paper. The situation is difficult, but a loyal subject does not serve two kings, and a virtuous woman does not serve two husbands. Since I have already served you, my lord, how could I seek another? My father is the chief examiner for this state examination. Write your poem and submit it." She gave him the premium poetry paper and a poem. Unseon, inspired, wrote it down in one breath, his brushstrokes soaring like a dragon and a snake. "See," in his handwriting, the young lady's face beamed with joy, and she said, "My lord, you still have many misfortunes ahead, so listen carefully to my words and do not forget them. When you leave the gate now, Hwaseon will guide your way. Follow her instructions. Also, go to your host's house, buy just a small amount of cinnabar, and when you wash your face, rub it on your left cheek so it leaves a faint red mark. Do not wash your face for 4 or 5 days. When you enter the examination grounds, if the servant of the Baek family tries to stop you from entering the gate, scold him loudly and drive him away. Once you stand beneath the notice board, before the poetry topic is announced, 3 men with wild, unkempt hair will come carrying a bundle of clothes and say, 'Sudden death.' Stomp your left foot and recite the scripture to drive away evil spirits, and they will drop the bundle and leave. When the topic is announced, if you submit your poem first, you will pass with the highest honors. On that day, visit the houses of the high officials in the capital without delay. When evening comes, come to my house. My father will ask the reason for your late visit. Answer him like this and that. Also, he will lay out a floral mat and a white mat side by side. Do not sit on the floral mat, but sit on the white mat. He will ask the reason for that, too. Answer him by saying this and that. Our 100-year contract lies within these actions, so engrave this in your heart and never forget it." She offered him wine and food and said their affection was not yet fully satisfied, but inevitably they held hands parted, and he stepped outside the door. Hwaseon ran out, took the young master's hand, welcomed him, and said, "Since you survived the night safely, it is an immense fortune." They crossed the pond on the boat. All things were quiet, and the gates were firmly shut. Hwaseon thought of a plan and told the young master, "I will do this and that, so use that moment to escape." She set fire to a pile of firewood and went into her room. Soon the flames shot up to the sky. The servants were terrified and rushed to put out the fire. Taking advantage of the chaos, Unseon slipped away and went to his host's house. Meanwhile, after sending the young master away, Gaedong had stayed up all night praying to heaven, lying face down under the seven stars altar. Hearing the young master's voice, he was overjoyed and hastily stood up. His paralyzed limbs completely straightened out, and his blind eye opened brightly. He became a whole, healthy man. The old woman and Gaedong welcomed the young master, sat down and listened to the story of how he survived. They rejoiced at Gaedong becoming whole again and praised his devotion. Soon the day dawned. Unseon rubbed a small amount of cinnabar on his left cheek while washing his face, leaving a faint red trace. After eating, he gathered his examination supplies and entered the grounds. Meanwhile, Baek-unsun arrived with dozens of servants and secured a spot under the notice board. When Lee Un-sun was about to take a spot, 3 men with wild, unkempt hair stood before him and shouted, "Sudden death!" Lee Un-seon glared fiercely, stomped his left foot, and chanted the scripture to drive away evil spirits. The men were terrified and fled. They ran over to Baek-unsun's spot, took something, and vanished. Unseon thought it strange in his heart. Shortly after, word spread from that spot that Baek-unsun had died, and his servants wept as they took his body away. Not long after, the poetry topic was posted. Looking at it, he saw it was the exact topic the young lady had given him. Overjoyed, he submitted his poem first and came out to the host's house. The old woman and Gaedong asked about his submission. Unseon replied, "I submitted my poem first, so go and see if my name is posted on the board." Gaedong went to check the announcement board. Meanwhile, the chancellor received the first submit ed poem and saw it was the agreed-upon piece. He graded it as the highest distinction and opened the sealed envelope. It read, "Son of Minister of Personnel Lee Jin-hui, residing in Gumnong, Gyerim-bu." He waited all day, but there was no sign of Baek-unsun. Thinking it strange, he concluded that the author of this poem was a heaven-sent genius and called out the name Lee Un-son of Gumnong. The sound of his name being called echoed near and far. Hearing this, Gaedong danced with joy, returned to the host's house, and announced that the name had been posted. The young master and Hwaseon and her mother rejoiced even more. Unseon, dressed in official robes, entered the palace and bowed in gratitude to the emperor. The emperor, finding him extraordinary, appointed him as a Hanlim scholar of the 6th rank that very day. He bestowed upon him a red robe, a jade belt, and a fine horse with a golden saddle, and sent musicians and flower boys from the pear garden to accompany him. Wearing the jade belt around his waist, holding the red certificate in his left hand and a white jade baton in his right, he sat proudly high on the white horse. His bright aura eclipsed the sun and moon, and the sound of music echoed far and wide. Who among the onlookers would not praise him? He went straight to the host's house. Hwaseon and her mother ran out, overcome with joy, offering wine and food, endlessly delighted. Meanwhile, Chancellor Kim returned home and told his wife about Baek-unsun not taking the exam and how Lee Un-sun's writing perfectly matched the agreed-upon poem, considering it miraculous. He loved his immortal-like appearance and lamented having made a contract with the Baek family. After visiting the various ministers, Hanlim scholar Lee visited Chancellor Kim's house as evening fell. The chancellor welcomed him and called for his new son-in-law. The praises of the onlookers pierced the distance. At this time, the wife, wishing to see the Hanlim scholar's appearance, went up to the moon-gazing pavilion, lowered the blinds, and watched. Just then, the young lady came out of the separate pavilion and laughed aimlessly. The wife scolded her, saying, "Why are you laughing frivolously?" The young lady replied, "Last night at the 3rd watch I had a dream. In the front pond, a blue dragon and a yellow dragon were fighting. The yellow dragon exhausted its strength and fell, while the blue dragon, triumphant, was surrounded by 5 colored clouds and ascended to heaven. I saw the victor and slapped the dragon's cheek, leaving a red mark as it soared into the sky. I remembered the dream and laughed." She then accompanied her mother to the pavilion and watched the Hanlim scholar's movements. He looked as radiant as a heavenly official descended to earth, and moreover, there was a red mark on his left cheek. The wife found this astonishing, thought of her daughter's dream, and wished to make him her son-in-law. The chancellor loved the Hanlim scholar and exchanged countless pleasantries. When they came down to the main hall to sit, a floral mat and a white mat were laid out, and he was invited to sit. The Hanlim scholar sat on the white mat. The chancellor asked the reason, and the Hanlim scholar replied, "This humble son has received the grace of heaven and is young in age. How could I sit in the seat of honor?" The chancellor praised him inwardly, brought out wine and food, and they talked. As the day grew dark, the Hanlim scholar said his goodbyes and went to his host's house. The chancellor went into the inner quarters and endlessly praised his immortal-like appearance. Meanwhile, Minister Baek had sent his son to the examination grounds, and having a firm agreement with Chancellor Kim, believed everything was secure. But before half the day had passed, his servants came carrying Unseon's corpse. Minister Baek held Unseon's body and wailed loudly. Even a heart of iron and stone would feel sorrow. However, the Ad cannot be brought back to life. With no other choice, he sent a notice to Chancellor Kim's house, prepared the body for burial, and laid him to rest near the ancestral graves. He then remembered the dream he had when Unseon was conceived, found the written record, and deciphered it. Sansan means 16, and Mokwang means human life. Sansan was the character for going out, separated, meaning 16. Mokwang meant sudden death, and human life meant lifespan. It meant that at the age of 16, he would suffer a sudden death. Reading the text, he grieved even more and lamented his fate. Meanwhile, Chancellor Kim and his wife adored Unseon, but since they already had a promise with Minister Baek, their hearts were troubled. Suddenly, a maid reported that a death notice had arrived. He opened it and saw it was the notice of Baek Unseon's death. Feeling pity in his heart, the Chancellor spoke to his wife. "We originally promised our daughter's marriage to the Baek family, but since Baek Unseon has already died, what shall we do? In my heart, Lee Unseon is a remarkable man of this age, and I wish to make this Hanlim scholar our son-in-law. What is your mind on this, wife?" The wife replied, "I also love that outstanding young man, and the young lady's dream was thus and so. Perhaps this is a match made by heaven." The chancellor was overjoyed and immediately sent a matchmaker to the Hanlim scholar. When the Hanlim scholar returned to the old woman's house, he called Hwaseon, told her everything that had happened, decided to take her as his concubine, and rejoiced. When the matchmaker arrived, the Hanlim scholar initially pretended to decline, but then accepted. The matchmaker returned and reported this to the chancellor, who was overjoyed and immediately chose an auspicious day, the 17th of the 5th lunar month in the year of Geyu. The Hanlim scholar, wearing auspicious garments, arrived at the chancellor's residence for the wedding ceremony. The Hanlim scholar's immortal-like appearance and the young lady's beautiful face were a pair of bright jewels and a perfect match for 100 years. How could the joy of the chancellor and his wife and the praises of relatives and servants be measured? After the ceremony, they returned to the separate pavilion, took off their ceremonial robes, and sat down. Remembering the past and looking around, they saw that the room was fully equipped with fine stationery. They could not contain their joy. As twilight fell, the young lady entered with her maids. The Hanlim scholar stood up, they exchanged formal greetings, and sat down. The young lady dismissed her other maids and ordered Hwaseon to offer wine to the Hanlim scholar, saying, "This is the nuptial wine, and I will also drink it, so my lord, please do not find fault." The Hanlim scholar gladly accepted the drink and said, "By receiving your high and bright virtue, young lady, my fragile life was preserved, my body attained honor, and I am now able to enjoy 100 years of happiness with you. This grace is unforgettable even to my white bones." The young lady said, "It is a match made by heaven, not my grace. Without Hwaseon's guidance, how could we have formed this bond?" She treated Hwaseon like her own sister, serving their lord together. Though there was a distinction between a primary wife and a concubine, what did it matter? The Hanlim scholar marveled at her generous and broad virtue. As the night deepened, Hwaseon respectfully said, "How dare this humble servant serve our lord in the same room?" The young lady praised her manners, and they went to the embroidered bed, their marital joy beyond compare. After daybreak, the Hanlim scholar and his wife paid their respects to the chancellor, whose love for them was immeasurable. The time was the 19th day of the 3rd lunar month in the year of Gabja, It was the emperor's birthday, so all the civil and military officials were to attend court. The chancellor entered first, and the Hanlim scholar was to follow later. The young lady asked the Hanlim scholar to come and said, "Today, when my lord enters the palace, a certain man on the street will hurl endless insults at you. Order your servants to treat him well, and when you come out, if that man insults you again, order your servants to soothe him. Bring him to our house, put him in an empty room, dress him in your clothes, and you put on his clothes. Then hide behind a folding screen and watch." He immediately called a servant, gave these instructions, and set off in a 4-man palanquin. Indeed, a certain man ran out and hurled insults at him. He ignored him, entered the palace, and came back out, only to find another man rushing at him and cursing. He had his servant soothe the man, bring him home, and seat him in an empty room, offering him a rich feast with fine wine and delicacies. The man got heavily drunk. When dusk fell, the Hanlim scholar changed clothes with him. As the night deepened, a chilling wind blew, and a young man with disheveled hair opened the door. Holding a knife in his hand, he entered and looked around. Seeing the man sleeping, he rushed in, slit his stomach, pulled out the insides, and ate them, saying, "Now I have avenged my grudge." And then he left. Seeing this, the Hanlim scholar was terrified and went into the young lady's room. Thinking of his past hardships, she offered him wine and said, "My lord, you have now passed all your misfortunes. You will return to your hometown, see your parents again, and live to celebrate your 70th birthday. Please do not worry at all, just have that man's body buried well." The Hanlim scholar immediately called Gaedong to clean up the body and asked the young lady for the reason. The young lady said, "The man who died this time lived thanks to your grace in a past life, and wishing to repay that debt in this life, he died in your place. The one who killed him was the spirit of Baek Unseon. Not knowing his own fate of a sudden death, he thought he died because of you and came to harm you, but he killed that man instead. If not for my instructions, how could you have avoided this misfortune?" The Hanlim scholar marveled at the young lady's wisdom. One day, thinking of his parents, the Hanlim scholar said to the young lady, "I, a lowly person from the countryside, received your great virtue, young lady, preserved my life, and attained honor. But it has been 10 years since I left my parents' side, and I do not even know if they are alive or dead. My unfilial piety is boundless. I wish to report to the emperor, receive a leave of absence, return to my hometown, visit the ancestral graves, present myself before my parents, and beg forgiveness for 10 years of unfilial conduct." The young lady replied, "I have heard that Gyeongnyong is 2,000 miles from the capital, and it belongs to Gyerimbu. How about you petition the emperor and go as the governor of Gyerimbu?" The Hanlim scholar thought it was right and told the whole story to the chancellor. The chancellor went before the emperor and detailed Lee Unsan's history and Gaedong's devotion. The emperor listened and praised them greatly. He appointed Lee Unsan as the governor of Gyerimbu, and Gaedong as the chief commander of Gyerimbu, praising his loyalty. The Hanlim scholar thanked the emperor for his grace, returned home, and prepared for the journey. Gaedong rode a fine horse with a golden saddle, leading the banners. Hwaseon and her mother rode in palanquins, the young lady rode in a gold-painted palanquin accompanied by many maids, and the governor set off in a 4-man palanquin. Their majesty was dazzling. As they traveled, the magistrates of various towns saw the governor's official dispatch and welcomed him in every street. The banners blocked the sunlight, and the sound of music shook the distance. Who among the onlookers would not praise them? Meanwhile, Minnie, Lee and his wife, unable to settle their minds thinking of Unseon and Gaedong, spent their days in tears and neglected their household affairs. All the servants ran away, and with nothing else to do, they lived in a 1-room thatched cottage. Who would know they were a minister's family? One day a villager reported, "The governor of Gyerimbu is coming down to Gumnung after paving the road." The minister and his wife thought of Unseon and said, "Some people have children and enjoy such glory, but what sin did people like us commit to be separated from our child in life and not know if he is alive or dead for 10 years? What is the point of living? It would be better for us to be dead." Meanwhile, the governor's procession arrived in Gumnung after many days. Gaedong, riding ahead, called a servant of Gumnong and asked, "Is the Minister Lee family in your town well?" He answered, "That family lost their late-born son 10 years ago and spent their days in tears. A few years ago, they went somewhere, but we do not know where they are living." Hearing this, Gaedong felt dizzy, unable to speak, and reported this to the governor. The governor heard it and wailed loudly. The young lady, feeling pity, consoled him, saying, "You will naturally find your parents in the land of Gumnong, so please do not break your heart too much." The governor suppressed his sorrow, reached Gumnong, thought of the old days, and had no heart for splendor. At this time, the minister and his wife went up the front mountain to watch the governor's procession. Suddenly thinking of Unseon, they began to wail loudly without realizing it. Just then, Gaedong, riding a white horse with a golden saddle, looked at the scenery and sighed, saying, "The mountains and streams are the same as before, but human hearts change from morning to evening." As he passed by, he suddenly caught the sound of a mournful wail on the wind. He stopped his horse and ordered a servant to find out the reason for the crying. The servant obeyed and went up the mountain. When the minister and his wife saw the officials, they stopped crying and sat still, so no one would know. Someone said, "Those people sitting over there are the ones who were crying." Hearing this, the servant went up to them and said, "Do not be afraid. Please tell me the reason you were crying." The minister and his wife earnestly told the whole story of losing their child. The servant returned and reported exactly what they said. Hearing this, Gaedong got off his horse, took the servant, and went up the mountain. It was indeed the minister and his wife. Gaedong approached, bowed while crying, and said, "I am your disloyal servant, Gaedong." The minister and his wife did not understand the situation. Not knowing who this person was, they said, "Why do you mock us so?" Gaedong bowed twice, wept bitterly, and said, "I am the Gaedong who left with the 5-year-old young master 10 years ago." The minister and his wife looked closely. His arms and legs were not paralyzed. Both his eyes were clear, and he was obviously a dignified official. Filled with doubt, they said, "My loyal servant Gaedong was half paralyzed and blind in one eye. Why do you speak such nonsense?" Gaedong then recounted the exact words spoken when he left with the young master, the year, month, and day. He detailed how they wandered in all directions, how he made the young master study, how they went to the examination, got a reading from Master Maeng, survived, passed with the highest honors, became a Hanlim scholar, married the young lady Kim, petitioned the emperor, became the governor of Gerimbu, and how he himself came down as the chief commander. Only then did the minister realize he was Gaedong. Pitying him for his past hardships, he said, "It is a miracle that your body has become whole again." The master and servant held each other and wept. All the onlookers admired Gaedong's loyalty. At this tea, the governor drove his palanquin forward and asked his servant, "Where did the commander go?" The servant answered, "There was such and such a matter, and he went up the mountain." Hearing this, the governor got out of his 4-man palanquin and ran up the mountain in his socks. The minister and his wife were there. He held them, bowed twice, wept, and said, "It is your unfilial son, Unseon." The minister and his wife held Unseon and wailed loudly as if mad or drunk. Who among the onlookers would not feel sorrowful? At this time, the young lady and Hwaseon, neatly dressed in green tops and red skirts with their maids, went up the mountain. Like a bloom of 5-colored peach blossoms, the young lady and Hwaseon bowed before the minister and his wife. The onlookers scrambled to see, saying, "This is a rare event in all of history," and offered countless congratulations. The governor escorted his parents and family down to their home. The next day, they visited the ancestral graves. After officially taking his post at the Gerimbu office, he held a grand banquet. The magistrates of neighboring towns heard the news and brought many gifts of gold, silver, and silk, congratulating the reunion of the parents and the master and servant. They held a great feast for 3 days. Then he sent a report to the emperor and a letter to the chancellor. Meanwhile, the emperor was having an audience with the chancellor, discussing state affairs. Suddenly, a report came that a dispatch from the governor of Gerimbu had arrived. He received it and read, "The governor of Gerimbu, Lee Unseon, bows 100 times and presents this report before your majesty. I, originally a lowly person from Gumnung, had a harsh fate. Parted from my parents at the age of 5, I wandered in all directions. By the grace of heaven, I passed the Dragon Gate and attained the highest glory. While your Majesty's grace is as heavy as a great mountain, I returned to my hometown, met my parents, and secured the ancestral graves. My heart has no regrets, even if I die right now. However, I have yet to offer even the smallest service to the nation. With what can I repay even a 10,000th of the nation's grace? The emperor read it to the end. He appointed Li Jinhui as the right prime minister and sent an official to honor his filial piety. When the chancellor returned home and read the governor's letter, his joy was beyond compare. When the royal official arrived in Gyeongbu with the edict, the minister and his son set up an incense altar and welcomed the official with great hospitality. The minister and his wife then followed the official toward the capital. The governor and his wife came out far to bid them farewell and prayed for their safe arrival. After many days, the prime minister reached the capital and entered the palace to express his gratitude. The emperor said, "I cherish the filial piety of your son, so serve the nation with a true heart." The prime minister bowed his head in gratitude, returned to the chancellor's house, and expressed his endless thanks. As he was about to secure a house, the emperor heard of it and sent a tiled roof house of several hundred sections and dozens of servants, making his favor shine brightly. Meanwhile, as the governor ruled the people, he governed with benevolence and righteousness. There were no bandits in the mountains, and no one picked up lost items on the roads. At this time, a royal inspector was touring the towns to evaluate the good and bad governance of the magistrates. He found that the governance of Gyeongbu Governor Lee Unseon was the best in the nation. He reported this to the emperor. The emperor, finding it even more admirable, intended to promote him to a post in the capital. But it happened that there was an extremely difficult criminal case in Gyeongju Castle that had remained unresolved for several years. The emperor, feeling concerned, appointed Lee Unseon as the governor of Yeong. This case was as follows. In that town, there was a filial son whose surname was Kim and whose name was Gongpil. His nature was gentle, and his filial piety was extreme. He served his mother with devotion, along with his wife, Lady No. One day, his mother suddenly fell ill, and hundreds of medicines had no effect. The couple never left her sickbed day or night, praying to heaven. But what could be done about fate? When she passed away, the couple lost their minds in sorrow. They performed the proper rites, buried her in the ancestral mountain, built a thatched hut near the grave, and spent their days in tears. His wife, Lady No, guarded the house and devotedly prepared the sacrificial offerings and daily meals for the mourning period. Lady No's nature was chaste and pure, and her beauty was unmatched in the world. Everyone who saw her praised her. Alas, unfortunately, there was a violent and cruel man in that village named Baek Gisam. He was naturally fond of wine and women. He always admired Lady No's beauty, but dared not violate her chastity. One day he thought of a scheme. Imitating Gongpil's voice, he made mourning clothes, put them on, and went to Lady No's house late at night. Lady No had firmly shut the brushwood gate. He lowered his voice and asked her to open it. Lady No, waking from a deep sleep and hearing her husband's voice, opened the door without suspicion. He came in and said, "It has been years since I stayed by the grave. Suddenly, my longing for you was so earnest that I came in the middle of the night." He took Lady No's soft hands and slept with her. How could Lady No know? Having deceitfully violated the chaste Lady No, he returned to his home, intending to see her again, and deeply hid the mourning clothes. When Gongpil completed his 3 years of devoted mourning at the grave and returned, Lady No thought Gongpil had visited her before and worried that others might find out. From that month on, she showed signs of pregnancy, and after 10 months, she gave birth to a son. Although her heart was joyful since she gave birth while in mourning, how could her mind be at peace? Several months passed. Gongpil saw the child, was greatly shocked, and asked, "What kind of child is this?" Greatly alarmed, Lady No answered, "It is the child I conceived and gave birth to after you visited from the grave on such and such a year, month, and day." Gongpil replied, "During my 3 years of mourning, I never had a single selfish thought and never came home. This means you were deceived by a violent scoundrel. As long as we husband and wife understand, what does it matter? Only then did Lady No realize she had been tricked by a violent scoundrel. Her mind went blank, unable to speak, and she stabbed her own throat with a knife and died. Gongpil held her corpse and wept bitterly. He sent a notice to her family. Lady No's 3 brothers saw the notice and said, "When I saw our sister yesterday, she was not ill. For a death notice to arrive so suddenly today, there must be a reason." The 3 brothers went down and saw that she had stabbed herself in the neck and died. Without asking for the details of her death, they went to the government office and filed an accusation. The officers came out, arrested Gongpil, and tortured him severely. But since he was innocent and guiltless, what could be done? He wept and claimed he was wronged, but who could resolve that case? Because of this, every governor who came down failed to resolve it, was either dismissed or died, and for nearly 10 years the town was almost ruined. The emperor chose the right man and made Li Unseon the governor of Yeongju. When Unseon took his post and reviewed the staff and prisoners, he interrogated the prisoner severely. The prisoner wept bitterly, claiming he was falsely accused. The governor naturally felt pity, removed his wooden collar, and put him in prison. He thoroughly cleaned the main office, set up incense and candles, dressed in full official attire, and sat down. As the night grew deep and all traces of people went quiet, a chilling wind blew. A woman with a knife stuck in her neck and blood flowing freely walked in perfectly clearly, holding a white flag with the character for 3 written on it. She stood with her back turned. The governor stood up, sat down again and asked, "The living and the dead are separate, and there is a distinction between men and women. What deep grievance do you have that you come in such a form to resolve your resentment?" The woman answered, "I was Lady No, the wife of the prisoner Kim Gongpil. Because my husband was unjustly imprisoned, I wish to save him and have come to tell you the story. The previous governors were not wise. Some died and some were dismissed. Now that I have met a clear-sighted official, I wish to avenge my heaven-piercing grudge. A husband and wife are the most important foundation of human life. How could a husband kill his own wife? Moreover, my husband is a filial son. People from far and near admire his devotion. How could he commit such an injustice? I wish to speak of my anger and agonizing pain, but my mouth is too filthy to tell it all. I beg your brilliant judgment to distinguish right from wrong." Weeping, she left. The governor did not know what to do at all. The next night, she appeared in his dream again, exactly the same as before. The governor suddenly realized the meaning. She was holding a white flag, Baekgi, with the character for 3, Sam, written on it. He asked, "Is there a man named Baekgi-sam in this town?" A servant replied, "He lives near the house of the prisoner Kim Gongpil." The governor immediately wrote a letter and said, "Take this letter, find Baekgi-sam, give it to him, and bring him here." The servant took the order and went to find Baekgi-sam. Meanwhile, although Gisam had committed the crime and caused Lady No's death, he thought only the heavens and the earth knew, and no human would ever find out. Still, his heart was always anxious, but as several years passed, he lived without worry. One day, an official came and handed him a letter. He opened it, and it read, "I have heard of your great reputation and wished to see you, but we were far apart, so I could only think of you earnestly. Fortunately, I have come to this place, but because official duties were busy, I could not communicate. I send this message now, hoping with all my heart that you will visit." Seeing the letter, Gisam immediately went into the government office. The governor opened the 3 gates and told him to enter. Gisam, wearing a scholar's robe, entered imposingly and paid his respects. The governor offered him a seat with due courtesy, brought out wine and side dishes, and talked with him all day. When evening fell, Gisam wanted to go home, but the governor invited him to stay during the day, treating him to lavish feasts and passing the days with music. After a month of this, the governor thought of a plan. He went into the inner quarters, made an arrangement, came out and chatted with Gisam all day. As the sun set, Gisam was about to leave, but the governor stopped him and said, "My wife has fallen ill and is currently in critical condition, so my mind and body are naturally unsettled. Please do not leave tomorrow, but let us spend the night together." Gisam reluctantly stayed, but how could he know the truth? Soon the governor dismissed the servants, offered wine and food, and they chatted. In the middle of the night, at the fourth watch, a maid came out and called for the governor. The governor stood up and said, "I will be back shortly. Sit here alone," and went inside. He came out a long time later and said to Gisam, "My wife fell ill and suffered for a month. Tonight she could not give birth, and her condition is most critical. I asked the doctor, and he said all other medicines are ineffective. There is only one medicine that works, but it is extremely difficult to find." When Gisam asked what it was, the governor answered, "It is nothing else but mourning clothes that have never heard the sound of wailing at a funeral. Where could such a thing be found? If you go home tomorrow and search widely for it, I will reward you greatly in the future." Gisam replied, "I will try my best to find it and bring it." The next day, he went to his house. After sending Gisam away, the governor called the guards and officers and said, "Follow Gisam. The guards should hide and the officers should keep watch. If Gisam brings out the mourning clothes and touches them, signal the guards, tie him up, and bring him here." The guards listened to the order and followed Gisam. At this time, since Gisam had deceived Lady No, slept with her, and deeply hidden the mourning clothes, they were indeed mourning clothes that had never heard the sound of wailing. Unaware that he was falling into the governor's trap and would die, he confidently returned home, took out the mourning clothes, and was about to cut off the collar. Just then the guards rushed in and bound him with red ropes. Not knowing the reason, Gisam shouted as loud as he could, but what mercy could there be? They lifted him so his feet didn't touch the ground and dragged him in. Seated at the martial arts training ground, the governor dragged Gisam in, confronted him, and scolded, "Listen here. If you know the crime you committed, confess it immediately." His voice was like thunder. Gisam's soul scattered, and after a single stroke of the paddle, he fully confessed to every detail of his past crimes. They dragged Gisam out, placed him at a three-way intersection, announced his crimes one by one, and executed him by dismemberment. Kim Gongpil was released. Having been imprisoned for 10 years, Gongpil, now freed as an innocent man, danced and clasped his hands in prayer, saying, "Having met a bright official like the sun and moon, the grievances of the wronged soul are resolved, and the jade and stones are distinguished. With what can I repay even a 10,000th of this mountain-like grace and ocean-like virtue?" He offered endless thanks, and all the onlookers felt a deep sense of satisfaction, praising the governor's brilliant judgment. The governor reported the reasons for revealing Kim Gongpil's filial piety, Lady No's chastity, and Jisam's crimes to the throne. The emperor, seeing the governor's report, praised Lee Unseon's clarity and commended the filial and chaste deeds of Kim Gongpil and his wife. He ordered a commemorative gate to be built for the filial son and chaste woman, and decreed that 10 bags of white rice and dozens of nyang be exempted from their taxes every month. The governor immediately called Gongpil, praised him, built the commemorative gate to honor their filial piety and chastity, and exempted his taxes as ordered. Gongpil thanked the governor's virtue and heaven's grace, bowing 100 times. Returning home, unable to live alone, he took a woman named Song as his second wife. Their minds matched perfectly, and living together for 10 years, they had 3 sons and 1 daughter, enjoying wealth and glory while praying for the governor's pure virtue. Meanwhile, the governor remembered the grace of the monks at Cheongryongsa Temple. He asked his servants for the way to the temple, loaded much gold, silver, and silk, and headed there. The monks, seeing the governor's procession, welcomed him with great joy, cleaned the separate pavilion, and waited outside the village entrance. After many days, the governor arrived at Cheongryongsa Temple. Walking slowly with a bamboo cane and straw sandals, he gradually entered. The banners played with the sunlight, and the sound of music shook the mountains and streams. The governor remembered the past and instead felt a pang of sorrow. The young and old monks came out in turn, bowed with their hands together, and said, "We apologize that we could not welcome your procession from afar." After settling in the separate pavilion, they offered tea and fruits, and shared memories of the old days. The governor bowed before the Buddha and thanked the monks, saying, "Years ago, when I was wandering, I came to this temple and preserved my fragile life through the virtues of all you reverend masters. Fortunately, receiving the emperor's grace, my body attained honor, but I had not repaid even the smallest merit. So I present these humble gifts as a token of my gratitude." He bestowed gold, silver, and silk upon them respectively, renovated Cheongryongsa Temple, and spent tens of thousands of gold pieces to buy many fields to support the temple, so they could offer Buddhist prayers in spring and autumn. All the monks were grateful and constantly prayed for the governor's long life, wealth, and honor. The governor bid farewell to the monks, set off on his journey, found the teacher and friends he had lived with for 7 years, held a grand feast for 3 days, and gave them much gold, silver, and silk to express his old affections. When he returned to his headquarters, the joyful voices of the citizens inside the castle shook the lands for 1,000 miles. Meanwhile, the emperor, who had praised Lee Unseon's good governance, heard of his resolution of Kim Gongpil's case and commended him again. He promoted him to the minister of Jerimbu and sent an official. The official received the edict, traveled through Hwangju, and arrived in Hyeongju. The governor welcomed him, took his seat with proper courtesy, set up the incense altar, and bowed toward the north. Then, taking his family, he headed for the capital. The people of Hyeongju blocked the road, weeping and pleading with him to stay. The governor gently persuaded them one by one, crossed the border, and reached the capital. The servants from his parents' house and the chancellor's house were waiting in the streets. The minister expressed his gratitude before the emperor, and the emperor granted him an audience, welcoming him and praising his past good governance. The minister returned to his main house and greeted his parents and the chancellor couple, who welcomed him anew, their love and affection immeasurable. As several years passed, the minister had 3 sons and 1 daughter with his primary wife, Lady Kim, and 2 sons and 2 daughters with his beloved concubine, Hwaseon. They resembled their father, possessing outstanding appearances and extraordinary intelligence. They married, filling the house with descendants, and their wealth and fame were the greatest of the age. The prime minister couple and the chancellor couple enjoyed boundless glory and reached the age of 90. That bitterness ends and sweetness comes, and that joy ends and sorrow follows, is a universal truth, past and present. The chancellor couple passed away first, and they were buried in the ancestral mountain with full honors. After the 3-year mourning period, the prime minister couple suddenly fell ill, and hundreds of medicines were of no use. The minister and his wife devotedly brewed medicine for them, but what could be done about the lifespan decreed by heaven? Soon they passed away. The minister and his wife grieved deeply, prepared the rites, and buried them in the ancestral mountain. All the civil and military officials assisted with the funeral, and who among the onlookers would not praise them? The loyal servant Gaedong built a thatched hut near the graves of the minister and his wife and served the mourning period, comforting the minister's grief. As time flowed and the 3-year mourning period ended, the minister thought again of Gaedong's grace, saying, "Gaedong's loyalty is the greatest in all of history." He erected a monument for the loyal servant, writing with his own hand, "The bones of Gaedong, the loyal servant of all ages." He elevated his rank, appointing him as the governor of Yeonju and General of the Guards. He also elevated the minister's rank, reaching the position of left prime minister. The prime minister and the governor of Yeonju thanked the emperor for his grace and lived to the age of 80 or 90, enjoying wealth and glory to the fullest. The end of 10 lives and 9 deaths. Just like the characters in our story, who overcame the fierce waves of fate to finally find radiant peace and warm connections, I hope a gentle tranquility settles at the end of your day as well. No matter how cold and long the night may be, morning always comes, bringing a beautiful ending. Tonight I hope you have no troubled dreams, but only stay in a quiet, tender slumber. If tonight's ancient tale brought you comfort, please quietly leave a like and subscribe so we can share more peaceful nights together. I hope your slow nights are always warm. Good night.